This story isn't just about the passing of a congressman. It's about a moment that instantly reshaped the balance of power in Washington. Doug LaMalfa, a longtime Republican congressman from Northern California, has died at the age of 65. While tributes began pouring in almost immediately, the impact of his sudden absence was felt just as quickly inside the U.S. House of Representatives. In a chamber divided by only a few seats, one loss doesn't remain symbolic for long. To understand why this moment matters, it's necessary to look beyond the headlines. House Republican leadership confirmed Tuesday that Congressman Doug LaMalfa had passed away. He was 65 years old. Based on publicly available information, LaMalfa was not simply another member of Congress. He represented Northern California for years and became closely identified with rural policy, agriculture, and Western land and water issues. Before entering politics, he was a fourth-generation rice farmer and business owner, a background that shaped both his priorities and his reputation on Capitol Hill. Colleagues within his party described the news as sudden. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, a close friend of LaMalfa, released a statement emphasizing the personal loss, describing him as a devoted husband, father, and a steady advocate for his constituents. Those closest to him focused less on political strategy and more on consistency, describing him as someone who showed up the same way year after year. That consistency is exactly what made his absence immediately noticeable. LaMalfa served as chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus, where he focused on issues affecting Western states, including agriculture, land management, and water access. While these topics rarely dominate national headlines, they directly affect millions of people. In recent years, his influence became especially visible during congressional discussions surrounding major wildfires in California, including those that impacted communities within his own district, such as Chico. According to colleagues, his approach during those moments was practical and policy-focused rather than performative, aimed at long-term solutions instead of short-term attention. But the story doesn't stop with his legislative record, because the timing of his death created consequences that went far beyond his district. At the moment of his passing, the U.S. House of Representatives was already operating with one of the narrowest majorities in modern history. Republicans currently hold 218 seats, while Democrats hold 213. That margin leaves virtually no room for error. With LaMalfa's seat suddenly vacant, even temporarily, the balance becomes more fragile. Speaker Mike Johnson can now afford to lose no more than 2 Republican votes on any party line legislation, assuming full attendance. In practical terms, every absence, delay, or internal disagreement now carries greater weight. This shift is not theoretical. It immediately affects scheduling, strategy, and the pace of legislation moving through the House. At the same time, attention turned to Northern California, where LaMalfa represented a large rural district long considered safely Republican. In the most recent presidential election, Donald Trump carried the district by roughly 25 points. Because of that margin, political analysts expect the seat to remain in Republican hands once a replacement is elected. However, the process itself will take time. Under California law, the state must hold a special election to fill the vacancy. That election is expected to take place under the current district boundaries, not the newly redrawn lines scheduled for the 2026 midterms. Until then, the seat remains empty, and the consequences of that absence continue to ripple through Washington. While the political mechanics moved forward, reactions from colleagues reflected a more personal side of the loss. Representative Richard Hudson, who served alongside LaMalfa on the House Agriculture Committee, described him as a principled conservative and a tireless advocate for farmers, rural communities, and working families. Hudson also highlighted their friendship outside of policy, noting shared interests that went beyond Capitol Hill. These reflections offered a reminder that Congress is shaped not only by votes and numbers, but by long-standing personal relationships. The response soon reached the highest levels of government. President Donald Trump ordered the American flag above the White House to be lowered to half-staff in honor of the late congressman. During remarks at a House Republican gathering, Trump opened his speech by acknowledging LaMalfa's passing. He described him as a leader on Western issues and a consistent voice on California water policy, an area where LaMalfa had been particularly active. Trump also noted their political alignment, stating that LaMalfa had voted in support of his agenda throughout his time in office. The president reflected briefly on whether to delay his remarks that day, ultimately deciding to proceed as a tribute, saying it was what LaMalfa would have wanted. These moments underscored how quickly the story moved from a single announcement to a broader national moment. Beyond the immediate reactions and political math, Doug LaMalfa's death leaves a longer-term question about representation and continuity. For years, his constituents associated him with stability rather than spectacle. He focused on issues that rarely generate viral moments but consistently shape daily life in rural America, including agriculture policy, land use, and water management. His absence creates a pause, not just in voting numbers but in institutional memory. While a special election will eventually fill the seat, experience and seniority are not easily replaced. For the House, already divided and operating under constant pressure, this moment highlights how fragile majorities truly are. A single vacancy can slow momentum, complicate negotiations, and shift priorities in ways that are not immediately visible to the public. For Northern California, the coming election will determine who carries those long-standing policy concerns forward. And for Washington as a whole, this episode serves as a reminder that behind every headline about numbers and strategy are individuals whose roles extend far beyond a single vote. As Congress moves ahead, the impact of LaMalfa's absence will continue to shape decisions quietly, in committee rooms and closed-door discussions, long after public attention moves on. If you want to understand how this vacancy could influence upcoming legislation, leadership strategy, and the next phase of House politics, the next video breaks down what happens after a congressional seat suddenly opens and why timing matters more than most people realize. To fully understand the significance of Doug LaMalfa's role, it helps to look at how influence is built in Congress over time. Senior members often shape policy not through speeches, but through committee work, quiet negotiations, and long-standing relationships with federal agencies. LaMalfa served for years on the House Agriculture Committee, where policy decisions directly affect food production, trade, and rural economies nationwide. His familiarity with these processes allowed him to advocate effectively for agricultural producers during regulatory debates, particularly those involving water access and environmental rules in western states. Colleagues have noted that this type of influence is rarely immediate for newer members, even when a district remains politically stable. In addition, LaMalfa's leadership within the Congressional Western Caucus placed him at the center of regional coordination, bringing together lawmakers from multiple states facing similar challenges related to drought, land management, and infrastructure. These issues often require long-term planning rather than rapid legislative wins, making continuity especially important. With his passing, that coordination temporarily loses a central figure, even as other members step in to fill leadership roles. The situation also highlights how special elections differ from regular election cycles. While the seat is expected to remain Republican, special elections tend to have lower turnout and compressed timelines, which can shift campaign dynamics and messaging. Until a new representative is sworn in, committee assignments remain unfilled, and staff transitions must be managed internally. These behind-the-scenes adjustments rarely attract attention but play a critical role in how Congress functions day to day. Taken together, the moment underscores a broader reality of American politics. Institutional stability often depends on individuals whose work happens outside the spotlight. Doug LaMalfa's career followed that pattern, built on persistence rather than prominence. As lawmakers, voters, and party leaders look ahead, the focus now turns to how his responsibilities are redistributed and how his district's priorities are carried forward. The long-term effects will not be defined by a single vote or statement, but by how effectively continuity is maintained during a period of transition. Ultimately, moments like this rarely announce their full impact right away. There is no single vote, no immediate shift, no dramatic turning point that defines what comes next. Instead, the effects unfold gradually, through procedural delays, quieter negotiations, and subtle changes in how priorities are managed. Doug LaMalfa's passing marks one of those moments where absence speaks louder than action. His career reflected a style of public service built on consistency, regional focus, and long-term engagement rather than national attention. As Congress continues to operate under a narrow margin and heightened pressure, his seat will eventually be filled, but the experience he carried cannot be instantly replaced. For his district, the transition will test how effectively its core concerns remain represented. For Washington, it serves as another reminder that the stability of government often depends on individuals who work far from the spotlight. And as the political cycle moves forward, this moment will likely be remembered not for controversy or conflict, but for how quietly it reshaped the landscape behind the scenes.